Hi guys, and welcome to Thunder Bay, my city Skylines 1 recreation and reimagination of a Florida-style city primarily based on the Tampa Bay region. As always, I'm your host and creator Legio, and if you like what you see here, well, you know what to do down below, just the typical YouTube stuff. So today we're on to episode 6, and today we're going to be primarily focusing on public transportation, or as I like to call it, big people movers. So we're going to get the frameworks of those all set up and more or less flushed out. You know, we'll get a pretty good start of what they're going to look like in the city. I'm not going to put any actual lines in today, so no bus lines, no train lines, none of that. And the main reason is the city's still somewhat developing. I don't know how I want the lines to run just yet, so that'll come a little bit later on in the series. But as for the here and now, we start this build off by first replacing Bay Boulevard with a new and improved road. I opted to use the 6-lane bus, bike, and tram road from the Mass Transit DLC. Or at least I'm pretty sure it's from the Mass Transit DLC. I could be wrong on that one. I can't really remember. I have the memory of a goldfish, guys. So if I'm wrong, just let me know in the comments below. I'm sure if I am wrong, someone will point that out. But I chose this road because it checked every box I had for this area. I wanted a road that could handle a high volume of traffic while also offering good public transit. And my thought process for this area is that the locals would probably use the bike and bus lanes primarily, while the tram would mostly be used by tourists. I'm not sure if that's how it usually works in cities, but at least in my travels, I do typically see tourists using trolleys and trams. I assume that's for the novel factor, and I've often observed the locals stick to the traditional travel methods. And as I've said in previous episodes, this area is going to have a high volume area of traffic going through it. So, you know, there's a lot of points of interest here: the arena, the park, the financial district. I plan on adding some other points of interest here. So it's just going to draw a lot of people. So I want to have multiple means of travel just to move people around. Another added benefit of this road is it sets up other networks that I want to build out later on. I do plan on putting a bike network through the city, so this gives me a good starting point and a centerpiece to base it around. And it gives me a chance to expand the tram network, which I was doing here, and that's going to run throughout the city. One of the goals I had for the tram was for it to act more as a connector to some other transit options. So I ran the tram up to the train station we built in a previous episode, and it's going to stop by multiple metro stations. So the tram network won't necessarily be a heavy lifter of the region's public transit, but will play a pretty big role. And speaking of big roles, I start to rework some of the old infrastructure we had previously placed. I removed the old metro station that I had by that train station, and I opt to turn it into an overhead station with a track that's just going to run right through the downtown core. I think this is going to be a much better setup than what we previously had there. Running tracks through this area is going to give us more streamlined routes. It won't be as abstract, and it's just going to connect the region a little bit better, at least in my opinion and from my thought process. Because now multiple lines can run through the area, whereas the previous one would realistically only give us one, maybe 2 lines, but now we can have multiple lines. So I think we're in a better situation moving forward. And then I start to restructure our overly complicated spaghetti interchange here to allow for better traffic flow and ensure the metro line can actually go over it smoothly. You'll see that a little later on. This interchange for sure needed more entries and exits. It was a little too one-dimensional the way I had it. I'm also doing a little bit of future-proofing for when the city does expand out this way. I'm hoping this is the last time I have to rework this interchange though, because it's getting a bit overcomplicated for my taste. It's a lot of ramps, and I had to do a lot of lane math in this area, and I am terrible at math. So I'm hoping you guys appreciate this monstrosity that I built. But I mean, I do guess it's okay. I don't hate it. It could be better, but I actually kind of like the way it is. It's unique. It's different. And I mean, it is Florida. They do weird stuff down there, so I'm going to have to do weird stuff here as well. And I do take some time to tidy things up and make sure everything looks good, make sure there's enough access points, the ramps make sense, the slopes and the curves are all nice and smooth. About the only thing I don't do on screen is the intersection marking, because let's be honest, you guys see that enough on these builds, so I don't want to waste your time with that. But I definitely want this interchange to make sense and work properly, because it's going to be the literal central focal point of all the highways on the map, so I've got to make sure it's right, because if not, that could grind the city to a halt. And even though I'm not really paying attention to the normal functions of the game, I do want things to make sense. I want traffic to flow fairly smoothly, because as you can already tell, the AI is not making any sense. They are coming on that ramp and they are literally getting all the way over to the far lane. So I'm going to have to work with that a little bit later with the traffic manager mod. Not a huge deal right now, but as the city grows, that could probably turn into something crazy later on. But yeah, just making sure everything makes sense, lining everything up using the node controller. I like to use that to line up the edges and then expand the node to have those on-ramps look good. And now we're jumping back to working on our metro line, because apparently during this build I had a whole bunch of ADHD issues going on. But I mean, if you're familiar with my channel, you know that's nothing too uncommon, so you guys are just kind of along for the ride, I guess. But we elevate our metro over the interchange on our way of expanding it out towards what's going to someday be the suburbs. And it might be a little silly, but I do really like how this S-curve turns out. It's really clean, really smooth. The heights on it are good. I didn't initially intend of having an S-curve here, but it was a happy accident, and you just gotta love when things work out like that. But we start to lay our metro lines for this area, and I have to admit, a good amount of time was spent staring at the screen, trying to figure out what I wanted to put here. I wanted to avoid an overcomplicated mess, but I had to make sure that the lines did go east and west while also connecting the downtown line. I'm not sure if this layout is how a professional planner would design it, but it looks good to me, and I definitely think it meets our needs, so we're going to keep it. And then I start working the metro out to what would be east here, even though cardinal directions are pretty meaningless in this game, but we do need some sense of orientation. And going out this way is going to end up being the harbor / industrial area of the city, the industry sector of the region. And there's going to be some other not so pretty, but yet essential assets out that way. You could say it's going to end up being the not so nice side of town. And I mean, every city has one, so Thunder Bay is going to have one as well, I guess. And then I end up dotting the metro line with some metro stations. I don't know if those are going to be their final resting places, but they're definitely in the geographic area that I want. And, I also use a technique of just putting a little bit of a parking lot road along the metro station. Again, they'll get touched up as I expand out into that area. I didn't want to spend a lot of time on those right now, because I don't know what how that area is gonna shape or develop. So I'm just kind of leaving it as a fairly open canvas. And then I work on a line I essentially pencil in a makeshift connection out towards some previous track that we laid in the first episode. This line will for sure get a touch-up as we expand out that way, but for now it's just going to remain a fairly ugly space filler. And then we move back to the core of the city as I continue to expand the tram line and the metro lines. I don't want to give away what I plan to build out in this area, but these lines are going to run through a pretty unique space, and they're going to end up connecting another major point of interest for the city. Pretty excited to get those built too. I've never done a build like the one I have planned. It's for sure out of my typical routine and definitely out of my comfort zone. But hey, I'm willing to give it a go and see how it turns out. It's a build I'm either going to nail or screw up. There will be no in-between for that build. And now I'm going to start placing down the depots for our public transit system. And I start with the tram depot. I had it placed earlier, but I go ahead and move it back a little ways from the main road just to give it some breathing room. And I'm thinking that depot is going to end up sitting in a small little suburban neighborhood. I think that could be pretty interesting to see, because I know I have a tendency, and I think a lot of other people have tendencies to avoid putting these things anywhere near where people are. But in reality, these things will often sometimes be near residential. And in my opinion, it will help keep the build organic and somewhat based. Because sometimes planners or reality just forces compromise, and here's an example of that. And then I just move over to the industrial sector to build out our metro depot, or at least the beginnings of it. I don't do anything fancy in this episode. Again, I'm just setting things up. I'm coming back to jazz this area up when we get to this area in a later build. But while the fast play is going, I want to go ahead and read a few of our comments that we got since the last post. And we will start off with Apsa DJ. Says everything is turning out great and he can't wait for the next episode. Well, I appreciate that, sir, and here is the next episode for you. So hopefully you're enjoying this one too. And then we got a comment from a Mr. Mark Anthony 1004. Says this is very enjoyable and thanks for this. So, very to the point, but I appreciate it. And thank you for your comments, sir. And again, if you guys want your comments read, do the comments below. And I just appreciate any kind of YouTube engagement because it makes me happy. And I could really use it because the last episode was a little bit of a stinker in the views department, but it's fine. I enjoyed the build. I just think the subject topic wasn't to your guys' liking. But if you have time, go check out the last episode. It's pretty cool. I liked it. So anyways, let's keep with our tradition. We missed it in the last episode, but we'll get it here and doing our history lesson. And today we're going to start with the history of the European colonization of Florida. And I say start because there's a large amount of history to this topic, so we might have to cover it in 2 or maybe 3 episodes. I'm not sure yet. It pretty much comes down to how much information I want to put into this and how fast I talk. So we'll see how things develop. And as always, a disclaimer, if I get information wrong or miss something, you can always comment down below to point out my ignorance. With that said, let's do some history. In the early 1500s, the age of exploration was in full swing. We all know how in 1492, Columbus sailed the ocean blue. And now he may not have landed in Florida, but his voyage did let the proverbial cat out of the bag about the Americas. So European powers were driven by a thirst for new territories, wealth, and a desire to spread Christianity. Of course they were. Spain in particular emerged as a dominant force in the quest for new lands, and it was under the Spanish flag that the first Europeans arrived in what we now call Florida. And the story begins with Juan Ponce de Leon, who some of you might be a little familiar with. His name is rather well known. He was a seasoned Spanish explorer and conquistador, and Mr. de Leon had previously been involved in the colonization of Puerto Rico, and had heard tales of a land up north rumored to be rich in gold and resources. And a quick note, you'll notice it's a very common theme for Spanish explorers to hear, hey, there's more gold somewhere else, you should totally go there. And then they do. Those silly conquistadors and their gold, always pillaging and conquistadoring everywhere for that sweet, sweet, shiny rock. Classic. But motivated by these stories and allegedly the mythical allure of the Fountain of Youth, Ponce de Leon set sail from Puerto Rico in 1513. And now I want to make another quick note. During my research for this, it seemed pretty apparent, at least to me, that Ponce de Leon never was actually searching for the Fountain of Youth. The fountain was never observed in any of the writings connected to him or by him during his lifetime, instead showing up after his death. And this was possibly politically motivated to discredit him. He had quite a few enemies. And per South Florida University historian Michael Francis, Ponce de Leon instead set off for Florida in an attempt to find Bimini, which is a chain of islands that are a part of the Bahamas. And this was after he had had his governorship of Puerto Rico taken from him due to political squabbling. I could probably do a whole episode just on Ponce de Leon, future plans. So the story of the search for the Fountain of Youth is most likely fake news, but whatever, still a good story. On April 2nd, 1513, he and his crew sighted land, which they named La Florida in honor of the lush floral landscape, and because their discovery coincided with the Easter season, known in Spanish as La Pascua de la Florida. I hope I pronounced that correctly. Ponce de Leon's landing is generally believed to have occurred near present-day St. Augustine, making him the first known European to set foot in the North American mainland, which I know has some contention to it, but we're not going to get into that right now. And his expedition marked the beginning of European interest in Florida, but it was definitely not without its challenges. The native populations, primarily the Timucua, who we discussed in an earlier episode, resisted the incursion of these foreign invaders, leading to conflicts that would foreshadow future interactions between Europeans and indigenous peoples. It's almost as if they didn't want to give up their land or be enslaved. It's crazy. And despite Ponce de Leon's initial efforts, his expedition did not establish a permanent settlement. However, his journey did ignite further Spanish exploration and attempts at colonization, because in 1521, Ponce de Leon returned to Florida with the intent to establish a colony. And this attempt ended when native resistance resulted in the death of many of his men, and ultimately Ponce de Leon himself, when he was mortally wounded by an arrow. Yeah, we may do a history lesson on him someday. He might not be a good guy, but damn if he isn't interesting. Anyways, the Spanish were undeterred by these setbacks, and the Crown continued to see potential in Florida. And by potential, I mean resource exploitation, some free labor, and soon to be Christians. Everything a burgeoning empire could ever want. But I'm going to stop our history lesson there for the day, because we covered quite a bit of ground, and like I said, there's a lot of information when it comes to the colonization of the Americas, and I don't want to rush it. I'm not going to, it's a large topic and it deserves some justice to be done here. And also, City Skylines video. You gotta talk about what's going on screen. So back to the screen. I built out a intercity bus station off to the left that's got the nice manicured grass and the palm trees. And then in the middle of your screen, I'm building out a road maintenance depot and an actual bus terminal for the in-city stuff. So I like the way these turn out. And I tucked them right in there with the highway. I think that was a nice little touch, because I didn't know how to fill that space necessarily, and then I thought I'd just put the bus terminals there, and I think that really works. I think a city would do that realistically. It's out of the way, but it's in a central location at the same time. So I just spent a little bit more time detailing this up as I finish the episode. And as we finish the episode, I want to say thanks guys for sticking with me through to the end. If you enjoyed what you saw, please do the typical YouTube stuff down below. It really use the engagement to make me feel better. It really helps my self-esteem when you guys do that kind of stuff. And also, it's just fun to interact with the community. And yeah, that's basically all I have for the day, guys. If you enjoyed this, thanks, and hope to see you in the next episode. Have a good day.